scripture lesson from today comes from the Gospel according to Luke in the 4th chapter, and I'll be reading the 16th through the 21st verse. And this is what it says. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. And he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all the synagogue were fixed on him. And then he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." Based on what we read in scripture and what biblical scholars have shared about Jesus, let's imagine what life might have been like for him in the time of our text. He had been living his life as a normal Jewish man from Nazareth, which was one of two major cities in Galilee. Galilee was in what is now modern-day northern Israel, which in Jesus's day was part of the Roman Empire. It was one of the three provinces of ancient Palestine. It was a very fertile area that included hills and plains. Although from a Roman perspective, it was ruled by Herod Antipas, the Jewish religious elite actually provided the leadership to the region, which included both Jews and Gentiles. This is where, at 30 years old, Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, and while he was praying, the Spirit descended on him, and he heard from heaven a voice that said, "You are my Son, with you I am well pleased." And then that same Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness for 40 days, where he grappled with temptations and came into a greater understanding of his purpose. Then he went back to his hometown and went to the synagogue. I imagine Jesus at this point was very focused and very spirit-filled and very solemn and very purposeful in his movements. As I mentioned last week, Jesus was a teacher, not a teacher. Not a preacher. He didn't get his hoop on. So when he went to the synagogue, it was time to teach. And when it was his turn to read the scriptures, he decided to teach by sharing a passage of scripture from the prophet Isaiah. We see it as the 61st chapter, the first verse and part of the second, which says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, sat down, mic drop. In that short passage, it was very powerful for Jesus. It told what he was about. It let you know he had a life centered in the Spirit, that he was knowledgeable of religious traditions as well as the politics and the problems of his day, that he was a man of compassion, that he had a commitment to justice, and that he was a person of not just talk, but of action. If we read more in the text, go a little bit further in that chapter, we would realize that once the people got over the shock of what he read, he also tried to explain more, and he said that the scripture was fulfilled in his presence, and told about how Elijah and Elisha had done some things under the power of God. And the way he told it let them know that he was not just talking about liberation for the Jews. He was talking about liberation for everybody. And that's when he got in trouble. That's when they wanted to push him away from the city and take him to a cliff and push him off and kill him right there. Sounds kind of like our present day. where folks who are used to being in charge or being the, in quote, majority can allow their fear of inclusion and the myth of not enough to move them to do everything in their power to kill or disenfranchise others, rather than do something for the good of all humanity. But as we know, Jesus continued to do his work for approximately 3 years because he had such a strong sense of identity and purpose. He was not concerned with being liked or being accepted. He was concerned with being true to himself, true to his God, and true to his purpose. It kind of reminded me of this sweatshirt I bought recently. It has Snoopy on it. I like Snoopy. And it says, "Be yourself. People don't have to like you, and you don't have to care." It's understandable that Luke would write from this kind of perspective because he was a Gentile, and therefore he was a descendant of the outsiders that Jesus worked to include. And one of the main images he tried to get across was about Jesus being one who sought love, life, and liberty, not just for the Jews, not just for some, but for all. That level of inclusion was not safe even for Luke to write about in his day. But he also stuck to his purpose, and he wrote it anyway. I've always been moved by this passage in Luke. It fueled me through accepting a call to ministry when I was actually on a path to earn an engineering degree, and then the plan was to get a business degree and make lots of money. But instead of pursuing an MBA after gaining a bachelor's in manufacturing engineering technology, I ended up in line in seminary, lining up registering for systematic theology and preaching and ethics classes, because I knew I had to try to speak a prophetic word of liberation, inclusion, and encouragement. But for my statement, rather than just pick up a Bible to tell you my purpose, I have my own statement of who I am. And that statement is, I am a manifestation of God, living as a teacher, preacher, artist, wife, mother, sister, friend, who is committed to leading and encouraging people to love God, love themselves, and love their neighbor, who also happens to be certified project manager to support my lifestyle. From a business perspective, you could say that's my elevator speech. An elevator speech is a statement about you, who you are, what you're capable of doing, what you want to do, and how your capabilities can benefit the company you're applying to. For our personal elevator speech, it would include all of those things, but instead of benefiting a company, think of how you are benefiting your family, your community, and our world. From the text, Jesus shows us the importance of being able to define who and why you are. People are going to put labels on us. People are going to think we're anything they want to think about us. They think they know what's best for us. Sometimes they're well-meaning, sometimes not. But I like how Audre Lorde warns against this. She said, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. You know, every now and then we need to take an internal look to see whose life are we living? Are we living from our own authentic sense of identity? I was reading Psychology Today, and it stated our identity includes our history, relationships, external characteristics, political opinions, moral attitudes, and religious beliefs, all of which guides choices one makes on a daily basis. Identity formation involves, number one, discovering and developing one's potential. Number two, choosing one's purpose in life. Number 3, finding opportunities to exercise that potential and purpose. We know from the scriptures and from the very fact that we're talking about him today, that Jesus went from that day in the synagogue, he went on to make a formidable impact in history. Unfortunately, not everyone who says they're a follower of Jesus tries to live by the liberative and inclusive ethic he tried to impart on that day in the temple, in the synagogue. Historically, there have been major atrocities committed under the banner of Christianity. And currently, good Christian folk attempt to exclude people from their physical space by using immigration laws and fears to try to exclude people from business and political gains. Perhaps they need to go back and read Luke 4, especially verses 18 and 19, where Jesus dropped the mic after his reading in the synagogue. Maybe we all need to have our own mic drop statement, an identity that we are firm about, one that includes all of who we are and all of what we're about, one that speaks to what we have to contribute to the betterment and the inclusion of all humankind. I invite you to write your own elevator speech. What do you want to be? What do you want people to know about you? What is your mic drop statement? The statement doesn't have to be original to you. It just has to be meaningful to you. Because even the statement Jesus made wasn't original to him. Those were the words of the prophet Isaiah. But they became so meaningful to Jesus that they became his purpose. I'm glad today that I know who I am, and I'm not afraid for anybody else to know. I'm glad Luke 4, 18 through 19 helped guide my way and set me on a path where now love is my purpose. So who are you? What are you about? I like how Audre Lorde put it when she said, I am a Black lesbian mother, warrior, poet, doing my work, coming to ask you if you're doing yours. Mic drop. Thanks for listening.